You're listening to The Brand Compass, conversations to navigate your way to building a brand fit for purpose and poised for success. Here's your host, Shelley, Rostlund.
Hello there, my friend. Welcome back. Great to have you with me again. If you are new to finding me and the show, welcome, welcome. And if you're a regular listener and friend, how you been? Are you ready for another dose of Shelley? My last solo episode number 42, I shared my very real and emotive experience of speaking on a stage at You Are the Media Creator Day down in Poole in April 2024, depending on when you're listening to this. And it pretty much slapped me in the face to remind me about why personal brand work is such important work. And believe it or not, even 6 weeks later, I'm still having conversations and one-to-ones with people who really stepped up to connect and chat to me after the event. And I'm just loving the discussions that I've been having. And then in my last episode, number 43, you will have heard me speaking to Isabella Russell of Music Radio Creative, who are my audio partners in my agency, 𝗘𝗣𝗜𝗦𝗢𝗘. And she came on to help me dig more into how artificial intelligence is actually impacting subject matter experts and many service providers as well. Now, why am I telling you this? Because today's episode has come around in my brain because of pulling on a couple of different threads. Okay, so the first thread is I'm just really fired up after doing that talk at Creator Day. I'm really fired up about this renewed sense of urgency that we need to bring more of ourselves into our work, and to do that thoughtfully and with more intention, because secondly, the pace at which artificial intelligence is accelerating in terms of its application means that actually we need to prioritize doing this deep work even more. Go and listen to that conversation I had with Isabella. I'm sure you'll agree. The third thread to my thinking was planted when I was reminded recently about Guidara and his concept of unreasonable hospitality. And I'll share more about that if you haven't come across him. And then the fourth and final thread for me, which really gave me the aha moment of, now I know what I need to do for this episode. And that came from tuning into a conversation on one of my favorite shows called Just Brand with 𝗘𝗣𝗜𝗦𝗢𝗘 and Matt Davies. And they had on one of my fellow brand strategists who's in one of my mastermind groups, Matt 𝗘𝗣𝗜𝗦𝗘𝗟, who specializes in brand strategy in the event experience space, amongst other things. But boy, did I lean in on what he was sharing about his take on strategic brand thinking in planning experiential moments. Right, now I'm going to pull all of that into an episode which I'm hoping will stoke the fire in you to pay more attention to how you make your clients feel, which is really an extension of your personal brand. Shall we get into it? Okay, buckle up, my friend. Let's get to it. Now, I've touched on building or crafting your brand experience in a few other episodes, but I wanted to go a bit deeper with you today in this one. And just as a reminder, if you haven't listened to those previous episodes, a definition for me of brand experience is it's all about how you want your client to feel when they come into contact with you, when they work with you, or even when they just communicate with you. It's really the 4D experience that encompasses sight, sound, emotions, and the physical experience. Now, as service providers, sometimes we may fall into the trap of thinking, well, what can we do? We don't have a physical product that we deliver and a customer unpacks it or unwraps it and then uses it. So what are we talking about here for us in terms of brand experience? Oh man, there are so many invisible and visible touch points in your client's journey, my friend, all you've got to do is sit down and really think about it. Hopefully with some paper and colored pens, if you're anything like me. Today, we are so lucky with the flexibility and access that technology has provided us as service providers. It's so much easier in this century to plan your touch points and feed into an already established habitual use of technology. And also, we better understand today human beings' innate needs and their desires to be happy, important, cared for, and looked after. With both of these bits of the technology, the access to technology, as well as this better knowledge of human beings, we can actively seek out the ways in which you can move your prospects or clients into a closer and more emotional connection with you. So, this is how I'm going to tackle this episode. First, I'm going to give you a couple of statements that I hold true for myself around this work. And hopefully you'll agree to, or at the very least, it will spur you into having to think about how you feel about them. Okay? And then this will give us a foundation for the rest of this conversation. Then I'm going to share why I think it is important to codify, so code as in development code, in air quotation marks, your brand experience. And I will explain how Guidara and 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 separately, but almost together, gave me reasons to do this episode for you. And of course, I'll tell you a bit more about them too. So let's get into our statements. Here's the first one. Making an emotional connection with someone means that that connection is deeper, more meaningful, and will last longer. Do you agree? If you don't, I'm going to hazard a guess that maybe you haven't experimented enough with opening yourself up to your clients. Next, follow-up statement. Moments, which are classified as memorable, are personal to the individual. And it's usually the feelings, possibly memories, thoughts, or imagination which are evoked from those moments that will actually shape what will be classified as memorable for that individual. Pretty sure we can all agree on that. The last statement I want you to consider: being completely present and intentionally paying attention to another human being is one of the greatest gifts that you can give. Agree? Now, those three statements are really what is at the crux of how special you are as a service provider and a subject matter expert. People will choose you because of how you make them feel when you talk to them, look you in the eye, and how you actually communicate with them. This, my friend, is your brand experience. However, it is not something you can just wing. You'll have to spend some time paying attention to what you do, how people react, and what you want to evoke in the future for existing or future clients. You codify this experience so that anyone who comes into contact with you will also have the same level of experience. Now, this is where Guidara comes in. Will is a restaurateur based in New York, and I first came across him when he published his book through Simon Sinek's publishing house called Optimism Press. He came on Simon's podcast, I think it was 2022, and he talked about his concept of unreasonable hospitality. And I was hooked, I tell you. Long story short, while his restaurant, 11 Madison Park, was earning Michelin stars, what they actually became known for was their experience. he had sparks of things that happened in his restaurant, and he basically trained his staff to become completely present for their guests. And then magical things happened. He codified their experience and he built the framework that enabled the magic to be sustainable and longer lasting. He even created a role in his restaurants called the Dream Weaver, so that someone was actually empowered to execute the magic. Now, I have completely shortened that tale a lot, but you can go and listen to the full episode and I'll put it in the show notes for you. Just a word, he was also on the High Performance podcast, but I actually preferred this one that he did with Simon Sinek before that one. Basically, we'll advise that for any business, it's important to identify the touch points, look at each one and think about what you can do that could make it interesting, memorable, fun, or thoughtful, and then make it into a system. My takeaway was that he showed that if you don't do this, this is when you will lose the advantage of building the momentum of emotional connections in your business. Codifying your experience and building a level of consistency in your brand experience means that all the years of work you've put into becoming the expert you are will be exponentially rewarding. Now, I'll pop the 5 steps I would suggest you focus on to make a start on codifying your experience. I'll pop them in the show notes for you just so that I can keep this episode a bit more conversational and less workshoppy. So just pop over to that when you're finished listening. Honestly, after fully embracing doing this exercise, you'll be completely re-energized and focused on making your clients feel great. I know you do already, but this stuff is next level stuff. This is the stuff of champions. The buzz you get from being able to create a truly useful, valuable, and emotively connected service to your ideal clients, it's addictive, I'm telling you. Now you may be thinking, what about Matt? Where does Matt 𝗘𝗣𝗜𝗦 come into this? Well, when I was listening to Matt on the Just Brand podcast, he was saying how he works with his clients to try and map out what is essentially a physical event experience. And in doing so, he asks very similar questions. They're similar but different to the kinds of questions you and I would possibly ask in trying to work out our invisible service with our clients, right? And I thought it might be useful just to share that with you while you've still got Will Guidara's Dreamweaver role swimming in your head. Boy, can I put that on a business card? Dreamweaver. Anyhow, Matt specializes in brand strategy and particularly in lighting in the event or experience space. So he shares how when he walked through the experience with his clients and what they wanted to achieve for their attendees to their event, he would ask a couple of big questions like, what is the main objective of the event? So what's the purpose of this thing that we're going to do? Who are the people attending and what are they expecting? So who's the target audience? What is important to get across in the experience of the event? So in other words, how do you actually want them to feel? Then Matt would physically map out the touch points of the event and then imagine walking through the timing and the space of the event. So for example, if you had to think about what that might look like, it could be like a high-end watch manufacturer or maker who's doing a product launch in a fancy gallery in London, for example. Then for each touch point, Matt would then have to think about the lighting and the sound and what would move the event attendees in terms of their emotions throughout the length of the event. And he talked about having to save some spaces to be empty or negative spaces so that the more important things that they wanted the attendees to focus on would actually stand out more. So that kind of meant leaving, dark, no light, and in some spaces having, focused light or soft light or whatever it was in order for that to be stood out. Honestly, it was so fascinating to listen to him sharing this, but immediately I thought about you and me. What we do is so personal as subject matter experts. Yes, we provide advice and guidance, and we do a lot of problem solving and solution driving, but we are people. Our clients are people. There are so many points in our journeys where we come together or are apart for a long period of time, and then we circle back again for one or other reason. Those are touch points to think about, but I also think that there are mental touch points to consider with service providers. So for our clients, they may well have periods of time where you and I might give them something to go away and do some work for us, right? Or they have to mull over something that we've given to them to plant in their brains. And there'll be other times when there are just pauses in between the physical time that we have together. What can you do in those pauses to keep the relationship going and foster the experience that they are important, they are cared for, and they're being looked after? Just because they're out of sight doesn't mean they're out of your mind. So how can you lock that down into something that you can do or implement to continue the feeling of being your client, and then codify it? I guess at the heart of this is really, how can you dial down the distraction that modern living brings to both you and your client and ensure the rock solid experience is there, which means they will continue to choose you to work with over someone else? When was the last time you were intentionally present for your client and really heard and saw them as they are in the moment? How different would our world be if we all did this just a little bit more than yesterday? I feel like we could end up with kinder people doing good things for others, and a society that flourishes by looking after each other and encouraging their fellow humans. You can start by being the subject matter expert that is also making the human experience at the heart of what you do. Thank you for listening, my friend, and sticking with me in this episode. If paying more attention to how you make others feel as an extension to your personal brand has caught your attention, and you want to delve more into shaping your personal brand and experience into something that feels good for you and really connects you with the kinds of people you're yearning to work with, give me a shout. You can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram. I'm the only Shelley Rostlund out there. And I will pop a link in the show notes for my calendar should you want to book in a conversation and maybe understand a little bit more about what goes into shaping a version of you that you are happy and comfortable sharing with the outside world. Who do you know that could do with listening to this conversation? Share this episode with them. You know you want to. Until next time, my friend, stay strong, believe you have value, and make good brand decisions.
Thank you for listening to The Brand Compass. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with your entrepreneurial friends and help them make good brand decisions. Until next time, let's keep the conversation going at 𝗘𝗣𝗜𝗦𝗢𝗓.com.